Gotta love how Goodreads is having start of the year problems right as I'm trying to film my December reading wrap up. Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my December reading wrap up for 2023. So, December 2023 was a good reading month for me, numbers wise, but not enjoyment wise. I read a total of 13 books, 3 of those were digital and 10 of them were physical books. So I'm really proud of how many of my physical books that I read, but again, I didn't enjoy that many of the books that I read this month, so that was really disappointing. My average star rating for December was 2.54 stars, and to me anything below 3 stars means that it generally was not enjoyable to me. So again, not good that I have 2.54 stars as my average. I averaged all of my star ratings from each month together to see what my total star rating for the year of 2023 was, and I got 3.3 stars, which is fairly low, but it means that I overall enjoyed the books that I read in 2023. If you hear that noise, my cat does this thing where whenever I'm filming or doing a virtual appointment or anything, Hermione just like scratches at my window for no reason. Geez, I really should have screenshotted my reviews as like a helpful guide when I'm doing this video for the books that I read in December, because look at this. Thank you so much, Goodreads, being very helpful to me right now. Now that I remember it, last night I filmed my little like wrap up for TikTok, which is just like me showing the covers of every book that I read and saying my favorite and least favorite. So I have a short list of each book that I read this month, but I don't really have my notes for me right now because Goodreads is like completely down. Yeah, it's completely down. We are gonna have to go from my memory, which will be interesting. This month I started off reading a book that is actually written by one of my aunt's friends, and I've actually met this author because he was at my aunt's wedding. Literally, I had no clue he was going to become an author, but my aunt decided that she was going to pre-order the book for any of the nieces and nephews that wanted it, and I wanted to read the book. I actually had the book added on my want to read shelf on Goodreads before I found out that it was written by my aunt's friend because it sounded interesting and I kept seeing good reviews for it. This book is Dark Hearts. It's by James L. Sutter. I am a huge sucker for when hardbacks have a pretty design like under the book jacket, so it looks like that. Dark Hearts is an upper young adult queer contemporary romance. This book follows David and Chance. They were once in a band together in high school. However, David decided to quit the band, and shortly after he quit the band became super famous. So David missed his chance to be famous. Chance comes back into town to Seattle after the third member of their original band passed away. So this book follows these two boys as they're reconnecting and grieving over their friend. So I really enjoyed my time with this book. I thought it was really enjoyable. There is tons of pop culture references littered all throughout this book, which was so much fun. I thought that David and Chance had really good chemistry. I particularly really liked David. I thought he was a great character. I thought Chance was pretty good too, but some things that Chance did, I was like, dude, not okay. I didn't give this book 5 stars though. Let me see if I can find the character's name. Like, oh, thanks for making an appearance, Hermione. I literally tried to block this character's name out of my brain. So let me see if I can find her name. Ridley. Oh my gosh. Ridley is the reason I can't give this book 5 stars. She is a terrible friend who doesn't respect David's boundaries. Like, point blank, David has been saying, please don't mention Chance around me, because like Ridley's a fan of the band, and David's like, don't mention Chance around me, like just don't do that. It's not cool because I'm not friends with Chance anymore because the two fell apart after David left the band. Ridley, meanwhile, is like constantly bringing up Chance and like obsessing over Chance and like being very sexual about Chance, and it's making David uncomfortable. And then at the end of the book, Ridley's like, oh my gosh, I'm the victim, you're a terrible friend, David. I'm like, Ridley, shut the frick up, you are the terrible friend. So that's the reason I couldn't give this book 5 stars, because I really hate Ridley, and because I didn't like how the book ended up viewing her as a victim when she is literally a piece of trash. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. As I said, it's a lot spicier than most young adult books, which is why I categorize it as upper young adult. However, it's still a great book. I think this book works really well as like a transition book between young adult and new adult. So if you want to explore more adult content but you aren't comfortable immediately jumping into new adult, then this book is a great book. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. Next up, I read a book that's part of a series but can be read as a standalone. However, I don't recommend reading this book as a standalone. This book is called Rook, and it is by William Ritter, and it is a book in the Jacoby series. So the Jacoby series has like one unified, like connected plot line. However, Rook is like after that as sort of a standalone adventure, but because it's connected so strongly to the Jacoby series, if you read Rook without reading the first, I think, 3 books in the Jacoby series, then you will be spoiled for the major events in the Jacoby series. This book follows Abigail Rook, and she works alongside Jacoby, who was the main like detective, like Sherlock vibes from the main series. Abigail now has the sight. The sight means it's sort of like she can see like the truth of what's around her. She can see like different traces of magical beings and people and where they were. It's sort of hard to describe. It took me a while to fully like understand what the sight meant as I was reading the book. So she is supposed to be using her power of the sight to help solve crimes, and she's having a hard time adjusting to having the sight. However, tons of magical beings are going missing throughout the city, and so she needs to get on the case and figure out what's going on, why are these magical beings disappearing, and how can she help. Meanwhile, there's tensions in the city between humans and magical beings, and there's tons of tensions brewing to the point where like there's just full-on chaos in the town. So I didn't end up enjoying Rook very much, and I was really disappointed. I thought I would enjoy Rook. It sounded really interesting, but I think one thing that could have changed things too is the fact that I haven't read the Jacoby series first, so that definitely could have changed things. However, though, I don't think I would have enjoyed the Jacoby series. I think if I had read the Jacoby series, it would have made Rook more enjoyable, but I don't think I would have enjoyed the Jacoby series, so it would have only made it like slightly more enjoyable. I just wasn't super thrilled with the author's style of writing. It was very like bland and dull, and it wasn't really like capturing my attention and holding me. I'm the kind of person who doesn't want flowery writing, but doesn't want completely bland and dull writing. Like there has to be personality to the writing, but it can't be so flowery that I spend like 10 minutes trying to decipher a page of the book that's very descriptive, if you know what I mean. I don't really like any of the characters really well. I think Jacoby was the only character that I was like slightly interested in, but most of the characters felt very two-dimensional. They didn't have strong personalities. They were very boring. I could see what the author was trying to do with Abigail and Jacoby. The author was trying to have like a Sherlock and Watson dynamic. However, I felt like the author didn't tap into the Sherlock and Watson dynamic enough, so it left me feeling like their dynamic only had like faint traces of the Sherlock and Watson dynamic, and I love that dynamic. So I was like, I wish that the author would have gone more full, like heavy into like, here's the dynamic, let's actually do this fun dynamic, but instead the author just did it like very lightly. I also found that this book was fairly predictable. I mean, you get the vibes right away who the villain is, and then you get to the big reveal and you're like, okay, it's exactly who I thought it would be. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this book. I did think though that the magic system in the book was very unique and interesting, and I liked that part of it. I really liked how it involved a lot of colors, because I think involving colors in a magical system is really interesting. So because of all this, I ended up giving it 2 stars, meaning I didn't like it, but it wasn't the worst book in the world. If you like the Jacoby series, definitely give Rook a try, because I think if you like the writing style and you know that you like the writing style of William Ritter, then you will probably like this book, but it wasn't for me. The next book that I read was an ARC that I received from a Goodreads giveaway, and this book is Family Family by Laurie Frankel. This book will be coming out in January, so pretty soon. Goodreads fixed itself, oh my gosh, okay. Now I can use Goodreads to help me with this video instead of trying to just remember everything, because I have the memory of a goldfish, which does make reading a bit challenging, but I try my best. So this book follows India Alwood, and she is a big famous actress, and in the middle of promoting her newest movie, she gets asked for a comment, and she gets a comment that sort of blows everything up and turns her life into chaos, meaning she has paparazzi outside of her house. It's absolute chaos. This movie in particular was about adoption, and she made a comment about adoption. She has 2 kids that she has adopted, and she has a complicated past with adoption. It's not as simple as just she adopted 2 kids. So this book is a lot about adoption. It's a lot about finding your family and what family means to you, and it has some really good conversations in here about adoption and about abortion talk, like pro-choice versus pro-life and stuff like that, and about just family in general. So I appreciated those really important conversations that were had in this book, and I think these conversations are really important. I think it's really important to diversify the amount of adoption stories that you read and not just read only one type of adoption stories. Like, don't just read only tragic stories, don't just read only positive stories. This one is like a positive adoption story mostly, but it also does talk about how adoption isn't a positive thing for everyone. And I think what's really cool about this book is if you read the author's note, the author has a personal connection to adoption that makes this book even more powerful. If you hear that noise downstairs, that's literally my dogs. I don't know what they're doing, but sounds like my parents are trying to get them to calm down. I really liked how much drama and intrigue was in this book. It kept me wanting to keep turning the page and figure out what would happen next. It sort of was giving me the vibes of like Taylor Jenkins Reid and how she writes drama and intrigue in her stories. However, I did have some issues with the book. I think there was like two main issues. First of all, most of the characters in this book seem very autistic coded. That isn't an issue, but for an author who is trying to tackle so many important and big subjects, why wouldn't she add autism to that when she has characters who very clearly are autistic? There we go, I can word right. I felt like it would have made the story more powerful and had even more deep conversations if the characters were explicitly labeled as autistic. Instead, they were just all autistic coded. I have really mixed feelings about autistic coded characters because I feel like a lot of times there are opportunities for misrep, but I feel like a lot of times like funny moments or quirky moments, like they can get away with those funny moments and making fun of a person's like unique characteristics by like not labeling them as autistic, because if you do label them as autistic then it might be like offensive. Anyways, I have a whole long complicated feelings about this, but I think that this story could have been a lot more powerful if the characters who were autistic coded were actually labeled as having autism, and the story could have delved a lot into how autism interacts with adoption. My other issue with this book is just that it felt like there was something missing. Like, I overall enjoyed the book, but as I was reading it, I'm like, I feel like I want something more out of this, but I didn't know exactly what that thing was that I wanted more out of, so I can't exactly label like what is wrong with this book, but it's like I feel like there was something missing. It's just this magical element that would have made this book more enjoyable and more impactful for me. So I would say that I'd recommend this book to most people because of how it covers adoption, but I don't think this book will be enjoyable for everyone. I think it's one that most people should read. I just don't think it's going to be like amazing for each person who reads it. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars, meaning that I enjoyed it, but it could have been better. I figured out what's going on downstairs. I think my parents are putting away the Christmas tree and my dogs are energetic while they're doing that because I think I can hear the Christmas tree being moved around. The next book that I read is a manga, and that is One Punch Man Volume 5. Hermione. It is written by One and the art is by Yuzuki Murata. So One Punch Man, in case you don't know, follows this guy, Saitama, and Saitama can defeat any villain with one punch, and he is like bored. He wants to find a villain that can put up an actual challenge for him, but every time he finds a villain, he just punches them with one punch and they're a goner. So this series is very repetitive. So I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep reading this series. I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's just so repetitive. It follows the same pattern. A villain appears, there's some sort of conflict to getting Saitama there right away, whether it's just like he's distracted, doing other things, whatever. He finally gets there, he does one punch, the villain's dead. So it's very repetitive. However, I absolutely adore all these characters in this book. I love Saitama, I love Genos, I love the characters so freaking much, and I also find the story to be really fun and light. Because of that, I gave this volume 4 stars. However, as I said, I'm not sure how many I'm going to actually end up reading in the series since it's so repetitive. Like, I'm hoping that there's some deeper interconnected plotline that eventually I'll get to that like is a lot deeper and not repetitive, but so far that hasn't happened. I wonder how many are actually in this series. I'm gonna look that up. 34? Is that just 34 volumes of the same repetitiveness? Anyways, I'm still gonna keep reading this series for right now, but I might stop at some point. Next up, I finished a series, and this series is the Sherbrooke Station series by Katia Rose. So the final book in the series is Your Chorus, and it is a romance between 2 characters that you get to see in the previous 3 books in the series. It follows Roxanne and it follows Cole. Cole and Roxanne have had a turbulent relationship. Throughout the first 3 books in the series, you see them have constant times where they're together or they're broken up, and they're constantly breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. So they have a turbulent relationship. Roxanne ends up going on a tour with the band, and she is going to be their violinist. So they're going to spend 3 weeks on a tour bus, traveling around, performing at different concerts. Roxanne is determined to not get back together. Meanwhile, Cole thinks that this is a good opportunity for them to get back together and win her back for good. So they have like different ideas of what they want out of this tour. So I gave the first book in the series 3 stars. I gave the second book 3 stars. I gave the third book 5 stars. I love the third book. What do you think I gave this book? Oh my freaking gosh. Where do I even start with this? Okay, I love Katia Rose. I need to clarify that. This has nothing to do with like the author as a person, and I think the majority of her works are amazing. This one was not it, and I'm honestly surprised it was written by Katia Rose because this is not the normal type of relationships that she writes in books. So in the previous 3 books in the series, you get the sense that the relationship is toxic and unhealthy, but you don't really get to see how toxic and unhealthy it is until this book. So they're constantly fighting each other and not working through their issues very well. And I mean, Roxanne is trying to work through the issues more than Cole. Cole isn't putting enough effort in to fix the relationship. And it was just a mess, and it seemed like they only had physical attraction towards each other and like nothing else. But you want to know what my biggest issue with this book is? It's the pedophilia vibes that come off of Cole. And it is the fact that it seems like he groomed Roxanne. Okay, so let's start off. So 16-year-old Roxanne has had a very traumatic moment with her stepfather. So she runs away from home and ends up in the city. 16 years old, in a really rough spot, both mentally and physically, because she's like alone in a city with no money to her name. Meanwhile, Cole swoops in to be the hero and saver. You know what the issue is though? Cole's 20. That is a minor with an adult. And not even like a 17-year-old with a 20-year-old. A 16-year-old. Okay? That is like a sophomore in high school. Or a junior in high school. So he decides he wants to like save her and help her out and be her knight in shining armor. He even knows that it's wrong though, because he's calling himself selfish for wanting to help her and rescue her. Then, before she turns 18, you can see in his internal dialogue that you see in the story that he has feelings for her. So, it's really gross. But then it gets worse for 2 more reasons. First of all, when they're having intimate moments as they're adults, Cole keeps picturing Roxanne's 16-year-old self. Literally pedophilia vibes, what the frick. The other issue doesn't have to do with like grooming and pedophilia, but like when they got together the first time, it was just straight up cheating. Like, I wish that I was joking. It was just straight up cheating. I was like, no, Cole, why are you like getting together with someone who is under 18 when you were already in a relationship with someone else? Like, just think about your life, think about things before you act on feelings. Oh my gosh. Okay, anyways, it's grooming because he's swooping in and trying to be the knight in shining armor and trying to save someone who's in a really vulnerable state, even though he's an adult and she's a kid. You don't get to see like fully into the relationship, so you don't get to see how much manipulation is in there. So I guess you could argue that it isn't grooming, but based on everything that I'm seeing, it is giving me heavy grooming vibes. And in terms of like redemption arcs for the characters, I felt like Roxanne had somewhat of a redemption arc, like she's working on herself, but then the end of the book completely like ruined her redemption arc. Like, all that therapy felt pointless after what she chose to do at the end of the book. Meanwhile, Cole never really works on himself or gets a redemption arc. So I got really frustrated. Because of their toxic relationship and because of their failed redemption arcs, I found that I didn't like either of the main characters at all, and I didn't find them to have redeeming qualities at all. The only character that I even semi-liked in this book was Nadia, because she actually commented on how she didn't like Roxanne and Cole's relationship and why, and I was like, girl, I feel you. You are in the right here, even though you are being sort of villainized. If I had to describe your course in one word, I would describe it as a monstrosity. because it romanticizes unhealthy relationship dynamics. So yeah, that's why I gave it 1 star. I'm really disappointed. I am still going to be finishing reading Katia Rose's books. I think I have like 7-ish books of hers left to read, so I'm planning on finishing all of her books, but I'm just like really freaking disappointed in your chorus. Oh my gosh, my dog's crying right now because my parents are trying to get the Christmas tree into the garage and she is upset that she can't be out there helping them. But girly freaking escaped the yard yesterday, so she is not going out there to help with the Christmas tree. Then I read Doctor Who Plague City. This is by Jonathan Morris. So these Doctor Who books are very hit or miss. They're just basically like episodes of the series, so they're like additional episodes. This is the only one that features the 12th Doctor with both Bill and Nardole. So this one takes place in 1645 and they go to Edinburgh. I've never actually said that word out loud before. Edinburgh? I have no clue. And the city is currently in the midst of a big plague. But as they're there in that city, they find that there are ghosts haunting the city. So families are being haunted by their loved ones that they've lost. The Dr. Bill and Nardole decide that they want to unravel the mystery and figure out what's going on and what are causing these ghostly apparitions to appear. So I really enjoyed this one. I felt that this was one of the better Doctor Who books. This is actually the second one of these Doctor Who books I've read by Jonathan Morris, and the only 2 of the Doctor Who books that I've actually enjoyed have been by Jonathan Morris. I think Jonathan Morris has a deep understanding of all the Doctor Who characters that other Doctor Who authors don't have, and I think Jonathan also deeply cares for this series, so he puts in as much research as possible to make these books as epic and fun as possible. I really like plague stories, so that was another reason why I liked this book. I love any sort of like apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic type thing, and I categorize plagues as one of those things. I liked the chemistry of the crew that we follow in here. I liked there was sapphic representation from the side characters in here. That was really fun. And I thought there were some really great conversations in here about how many people the Doctor can actually save. However, that being said, I feel like this book could have been a lot deeper than it was because you're dealing with some really hard-hitting topics and conversations, but it just didn't feel deep enough. I want to read off my favorite quote really quickly from the book because this is one of the quotes that I just love that the Doctor said. "People can't mourn what they don't know they ever had," said the Doctor, "but, and this is the important thing, given the choice, they would rather have the grief. They would rather spend the rest of their lives in mourning than lose a single memory of those they have lost, because there's nothing more precious than those memories. They are all that they have left of their loved ones, and it is with those memories that they keep them alive." I just thought that was really beautiful. And it would have been cool if we had seen Peter Capaldi say that in an episode, but we just get it in book format. I ended up giving Doctor Who Plague City 4 stars. Definitely recommend it if you're a Doctor Who fan, especially if 12 is one of your favorite Doctors. Next up is a book that I feel like I'm going to be judged for even showing the cover on here. And what's even worse about this book is that I literally got it from a family friend. I mean, I know it wasn't like intentional because it was sort of like mystery books that I got, but I was like, okay, this is interesting. This book is Unzipped by Lois Grayman. I don't know if I said her name correctly. Oh boy, okay. Look at that cover and you might be able to figure out that it's a little raunchy. This book follows Chrissy, and Chrissy is a therapist, and she has this famous football player who is getting therapy sessions from her, and in one session he shows up and he tries to R-word her. But before he can successfully R-word her, he dies. Passes out dead. Falls dead. And then this annoying cop comes into the story, and his name is Jack Rivera. Rivera is a detective who's trying to figure out what actually happened here. Okay, I have a lot of issues with this book. Biggest issue is that Chrissy's a therapist, but I thought that she was very terrible for therapy representation because she's constantly making fun of her patients and their problems. Therapy is a very useful tool for tons of people. I honestly think there is more people in this world who need to use therapy because I feel like not enough people who need therapy are actually in therapy. So I didn't really like the therapy representation here. And also she kept in particular making fun of this one guy who was overthinking his decisions about which sandwiches to bring. And I was like, okay, sounds like he might just be having overthinking from anxiety, he might have autism, he might have OCD, and meanwhile Chrissy is just constantly making fun of him. And I'm like, he legitimately has something going on that he needs help with and you are making fun of him. What the hell, lady? Then I hate the main character. She's completely incompetent as a therapist, and I hated some of the actions that she made throughout the story. For example, a man said no to having intercourse with her because she was drunk, and she got really upset and held a grudge over this man. And I was like, girl, you can't consent when you're drunk, and people are allowed to say no to having intercourse with you. Like, what the hell? And she's a therapist. She should understand boundaries better. And then also, there was this guy who like essayed her, which wasn't good. But then instead of just like reporting it, or instead of like working through it, she like held it over him as like, I'm gonna report you to the cops if you don't do exactly what I want. And I was like, that's just gross. It's just horrid. I also thought that the love interest in this book was not good at all. He was constantly harassing Chrissy, and I honestly don't see any connection between them. And I think that Chrissy is not a good character, but I think Chrissy deserved better than to fall in love with a man who's constantly harassing her and treating her like crap. I also didn't feel like this book was much of a mystery, despite the fact that it's supposed to be a mystery. It's supposed to be like solving this murder. But I felt like most of the book was just Chrissy doing things that she didn't think through, and then she got herself in bad situations, and she was trying to like stop herself from getting into legal trouble. I was like, I want more mystery, I want more clues, I want more foreshadowing of who the actual like murderer is and stuff like that, but it's not provided in the book. And then this book is like problematic and insensitive. It's extremely fatphobic. The gay representation here is really odd because multiple times throughout the story she complains about how men are out of her dating pool now because they have come out as gay. And I'm like, that is like borderline homophobic. There's tons of racism thrown in this book as well. The worst being she dresses up as a Muslim woman at one point, and so she uses it as a disguise, and she like wraps blankets and stuff around herself to try and make herself look Muslim. But the worst part is that she uses a towel on her head for a hijab, and saying towel head is a common racist remark that's made towards Muslim people, specifically Muslim women. So I'm like, that's extremely racist. What the hell? And there's a ton of really terrible writing in here. I literally have a lot marked in my review. Let me read you some. I fluttered my lashes like a llama with a retinal problem. For just a moment I fantasized about reaching across the leather seat and twisting his nipple until he screamed, but I was generally against torturing unconscious men. That's the therapist saying that. Rivera's smile made him look like a cannibal at a fat farm. There's so many similes in here that I'm like, did you think these similes through before you wrote them down in this book? Let's see, what are some other quotes? If I were her dad, I'd have moved to the Antarctic with her by now, keep her in layers of goose down and feed her whale fat. There are days when I would gladly sell all 3 of my moronic brothers into slavery for a mozzarella stick. Like, these are things written in a published book. A published book. What in the world? And it's a series. It's not even just a standalone. Whew. So I hated this book. This book was written in 2005, so some of the stuff that I criticized could definitely be contributed to the fact that this is an older book. However, I despise this book. I will never read the sequels to this book, and this book is immediately a book that I'm adding to my pile of books to get rid of. Yeah. No need to keep crappy books like this one around. Next up, I read Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman, or Osman. I'm not sure which one. I don't know. I feel like I should know how to pronounce her last name because I love the series, but I just don't remember. So the Heartstopper series is a cute queer series. That is all you need to know. There's tons of queer characters in here, and it follows Nick and Charlie. So I liked this one, and I found that it was better than the 4th volume in the series. The 4th volume in the series had eating disorder representation, but my issue with volume 4 is that the eating disorder representation was called anorexia when Charlie was only showing ARFID symptoms in volume 4. However, in volume 5, Alice went out of their way to make sure that Charlie's symptoms matched anorexia better than ARFID, which I thought was great. This volume in particular deals a lot about sex and nervousness about it, but also like normalizing that it's okay to have those feelings. So I think that's an important conversation for teens to be reading. But it also deals a lot with long distance relationships and looking at universities to attend. So I thought this was a really great book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I just feel like I didn't enjoy it as much as the first 3 volumes in the series, but I did enjoy it more than volume 4, so that's why I gave it 4 stars. Then I read a Nancy Drew book, which I haven't read one of these in years, and I read The Sign of the Twisted Candles by Caroline Keene, and this is book 9 in the series. So in this book, Nancy and her friends find out that there is an old man who is sort of being kept prisoner in his house by the people who are working for him as like maids, I guess, like keeping the house running and taking care of the house and stuff. So Nancy goes and gets involved in trying to figure out what's going on, and when she goes there, she gets more involved than she originally planned because there's more to this than just a man being kept prisoner in his own home. So this was my first time reading a Nancy Drew book. Since I was a kid, I used to think Nancy Drew was like one of the best series in the world, the peak of all like literature. I don't think that anymore. I think it's really bland. The characters are extremely bland. The writing's bland. There's just nothing interesting about this series, unfortunately, anymore. And I found the mystery was very predictable. I mean, at the start of this book, they're literally like, here's the bad guys. And then at the end of the book, they're like, surprise, it's the bad guys. It's like, no, you told us who the bad guys were literally in the first chapter of the book. And I had a hard time reading about the bad guys because of how much gaslighting they used. I did think that the whole particular parts of the book, like the scavenger hunt revolving around the twisted candles, was interesting. You would understand what that means if you read the book. There was some like scavenging around an old mansion to find different artifacts. That was interesting. But other than that, this book was not good. And I think that the two movies that came out in the past 20 years, one has Emma Roberts in it and the other one has, oh gosh, I forget her name, but she's from It. And then I think that the TV show too, I think those three are much better than the original book series because they flesh out the mysteries more, they flesh out the characters more, and they just are more engaging than these books. So yeah, I gave this one 2 stars. I do have a ton of other volumes in the Nancy Drew series that I own that I haven't read yet, so I will be reading more in this series eventually, but I'm not really looking forward to it. Next up is the worst book that I read this month, and I read it in one night because it was so bad that I just wanted to get it over with. Basically, I get to a certain point every year where I want to try to read smaller books. That way I can just like start my new year with like not a book split over like 2023 2024, you know. So the rest of the books that I read are really short. So this is one that I read on BookFunnel. I actually ended up reading this one because I was on vacation. I was in Seattle and I'd only brought this book on the vacation because I thought that this book would be long enough, and it wasn't. And I finished this book on the first night of my 2-night vacation, and so I was in Seattle and I was like, okay, I'm going to find a short book on my phone. So I opened BookFunnel and I found this book on there. I'm trying to get my laptop to load right now so that I can tell you who the author of this book is because I don't remember off the top of my head. This book is called Uncovering Lily and it is by Renee Webb. So there's 2 points of view here. There's Lily and then there's Finn. So Lily was studying abroad and she was in Paris when she was kidnapped and basically put into human sex trafficking. So Finn is just planning on meeting an investor, and the investor wants to meet at a brothel, another word that I've never said out loud before. So he meets the guy there for a business meeting and he discovers Lily there, and he knows Lily because he works with one of Lily's relatives. So he decides that he wants to save Lily. Okay, this is a steamy dark romance, but I had a ton of issues with it. First of all, this book was basically like, let's take human sex trafficking and try and make it look hot. That's extremely problematic and disgusting. Like, it would be one thing if like he only started getting romantic with her like after he rescued her, but he hasn't rescued her yet when he starts to get romantic with her and she starts to fall in love with him before she even discovers that he's gonna like save her and rescue her. So I was like, this is really gross. You're taking a very serious issue and you're trying to make it look hot and attractive, and it's not. It is literally not. I feel like a lot of the stuff I want to say about this book isn't appropriate for me to discuss on YouTube, so I will link my review to this book down in the description below because I have a very detailed review on everything that I hated about this book. I hated how Finn had this annoying trait of making rules but then not following his own rules. Like, he made a rule with Lily that they won't lie to each other, that they'll be 100% honest with each other, but he like engages with really big lies of omission. Like, he gets mad at Lily for saying that a milkshake tastes good when it doesn't taste good. He gets mad at her. He's so pissed off. Meanwhile, he hides how he's connected to Lily the whole time. Like, he's getting romantic with her and he won't tell Lily even his name. I'm like, dude, that's a big red flag for you. There's some fat phobic moments in this book that rubbed me the wrong way, and that wasn't cool. And also, can we talk about how in this book they take like 50 billion baths and showers? I'm like, how are your fingers not like raisins? And you're wasting so much water. You won't stop bathing and showering. I'm like, literally, did the author not think this through? I think there's literally like 4 showers and 2 baths. I might be missing a couple, but considering the fact that I remember 4 distinct showers and 2 distinct baths in a book that's like only about like 120 pages or something like that, that's weird. So yeah, I didn't like this book. I gave it 1 star. It is extremely problematic for the way that it tries to romanticize something that is absolutely horrific and terrible. And yeah, I don't really recommend this book to anyone. 3 more books to talk about. I feel like I've been talking quite a while. Then I read The Slitheen, which is a book in the Doctor Who Files series. I've read one of these before, but in case you haven't heard me talk about this series before, there's basically like factual information about different characters or creatures from Doctor Who, and then there's a little quiz to test your knowledge about what you just read, and then at the end of the story there is a original short story featuring the creature or the character. The Slitheens have never been the most interesting of Doctor Who villains for me. I just feel like there's a lot better villains out there. However, I did think that this book was a great recap on the Slitheens, and I did like the short story at the end because I like spending more time with the Doctor and Rose. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It could have been a lot better, especially if it had focused on like a different alien creature, but it was still pretty good, so 3 stars. Then I read this book. I read Vampire Knight Volume 4 by Matsuri Hino, and I decided to DNF this series. So I don't even really know how to describe this manga series because I find that the manga is really hard to follow. I liked the anime when I was younger, but the manga is really hard to follow. There's sort of like a night class and a day class, the night class being vampires, and it follows this girl Yuki, and she is this like, I forget what is the term that she's called. She's a guardian of the school, so she's like protecting the day class from the vampires. There's like romance in here, there's like a love triangle, and it just is not as good as I remember it being when I watched the anime. The artwork for the characters are very similar, so it's hard to keep the characters apart. Like, do you see these two? They look literally identical, and I mean they're related, but like I can't tell them apart at all. And there's other characters that I can't tell apart too, and it's hard when I can't tell the characters apart and there's like 15 main characters that you're supposed to know and understand. And then I just found that the story was really hard to follow just because of the fact that I couldn't tell the characters apart, and just in general. I do really like Zero. This is Zero right here. I think he's a great character, but I think the rest of the book just is not holding my attention. So I'm gonna quit this series, especially quitting it because I know the plot twist that happens later in the series involving the romance, because unfortunately I have watched the anime and I used to enjoy it, which is embarrassing to admit, but yeah. 2 stars, quitting the series. I don't recommend this series. I actually posted about Vampire Knight on my TikTok, my BookTok in particular. I had someone say that there's disturbing relationship dynamics in here, so I'm like, oh no. What did the manga do that's significantly worse than the anime besides the one plot twist? If you know, you know. And then the final book that I read in 2023 is another Doctor Who Files book, and this is about K9. K9 is this robot dog that I think was first introduced in classic Doctor Who, but then you get to see K9 again in the new reboot of Doctor Who. K9 has always been an interesting character, but this book didn't work for me. This book is like, I don't even know, is there page numbers in here? There is page numbers. This book is 48 pages long, and it repeats the same information at least 3 times. It's very repetitive, which in a book this short it should not be repetitive. And then the short story at the end, let me see if I can find a good page to show you what it looks like. It's written as computer code, which makes sense for the character K9 since K9 is a computer like robot dog, but it made the short story feel really disjointed and technical, and it felt like especially way too over technical for a short story that I'm supposed to be enjoying. So I ended up giving this one 2 stars. These Doctor Who file books are fairly decent, just K9 is not a very good one. So yeah, I have like almost an hour of footage now that I need to go edit for this wrap up, and I'll talk to all of you later. Until next time, goodbye.